you need to go and review terms and conditions for each of the platforms that you're publishing to. Now, if you're selling direct, doesn't matter. You can go ahead and do whatever. You could make an entire Sears Roebuck catalog if you wanted to have ads, if it's doing direct sales. But if you're leveraging a platform like KDP, Drafted Digital, Publish Drive, so on and so forth, go through and review those terms and conditions, because some of them might actually have somewhere in the fine print that ads are not allowed.
Hello, fellow creative voyagers. This week on the Indie Author Podcast, I talk with Dale L. Roberts about book sponsorships, based on his experience soliciting sponsors for his series of nonfiction books. We discuss the importance of matching sponsorships with your theme and brand, of reading the fine print in the terms and conditions of the platforms you'll use to distribute the book, how he made the decision about where to place the ads and what reader response has been, the information you'll need to pitch a potential sponsor, and the importance of asking why if you get a no. We also discuss some ways that fiction authors might pursue sponsorship for their books and whether sponsorships and crowdfunding is an either or a both and proposition. And now let's hear from Dale L. Roberts about book sponsorships. Hello, and welcome to the Indie Author Podcast. Today, my guest is Dale Roberts. Say, Dale, how are you doing?
What's up? This is the 50th appearance of me on the Indie Author Podcast. I think I'm just going to go ahead and start taking over. Like, I'm like Jimmy Fallon is to Jay Leno, right?
That's Maybe? Right. I'll call you Jimmy and you can call me Jay, or vice versa.
There you go.
Yeah, I should count up. Before any time we talk, I should count up how many appearances you've made because you're racking them up for sure.
Yeah, well, you're always so obliging. And I think each one of our conversations are always they're a lot of fun. They're very insightful. I must admit, though, for all the number of podcasts I've been on here with you, everybody needs to go back and listen to some of her backlog. They're amazing guests, not just me. But when am I going to co-author a book with you? I'm starting to feel left out. I feel like every guest has done a co-authoring with you.
Interesting. Well, I have to use that as an opportunity to mention once again about From Page to Platform, which I co-authored with the lovely Michael Laurent. So yes, let's just stick around after we get done recording and chat about that a little bit. That's very intriguing.
Yeah, for sure. You covered everything. And Michael is a fantastic author. You couldn't have partnered yourself with somebody. But Mark Leslie Lefebvre was pretty awesome, though, too. I can't pick favorites here. What are you doing, Matty? You've painted me into a corner.
Yes, I have had very, very good luck with the people that I've had an opportunity to co-author with. So that has been great fun.
Yeah.
So I think most people know you, but just to be thorough, I'm going to give you a little introduction. Dale L. Roberts is a self-publishing advocate, award-winning author, and renowned video creator. With over 50 publications, he has become an authority in self-publishing, to say the least, leading him to create his own YouTube channel, Self-Publishing with Dale, regarded as one of the premier information resources in the indie publishing community. And Dale lives in Columbus, Ohio, with his wife, Kelli, and their two rescue cats, Auggie and Allie. And so the conversation today is going to be about book sponsorships. And Dale, you and I were having some other conversation I can't remember anymore, and you had mentioned book sponsorships, and you started telling me about this experience. And I said, no way, just hold on, because other people are going to want to hear this too. Yeah. So I wanted to wait until I had a recording going to talk with you about that. So I'm going to ask you first, just talk about what's up with book sponsorships.
Man, the best way to do this is to kind of tell it through story. I've been running this YouTube channel for the past 8 years now, and probably about 6 of the 8 years, I've had continual sponsorships for my channel. I've worked with some of the biggest brands, from like Lulu to Miblart to Dibbly Create to Thinkific to, I mean, gosh, there's so much. And at this point, I'm just so tenured in the space of YouTube content creation and getting sponsorships and such that my brain goes, I can already do sponsorships. Why can't I be able to get somebody to sponsor my books? Now, a good friend of mine, and I recommend everybody stop what you're doing, pause this podcast, don't close out the window, obviously. Go over, look up Creator Wizard Justin Moore. Creator Wizard is available on YouTube, Instagram, X, you name it. He's everywhere. And he's essentially like the brand deal and sponsorship whisperer. And he's a good friend of mine. Not too long ago, he came to me for consultation for writing and publishing his book. And he's still working on it. And for whatever reason, one day, I decide, wow, what if I had one of my books sponsored? And I'm thinking, this is genius. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to get a brand. They're going to sponsor my book. They're going to pay me. And then I can offset the cost for production and marketing and promotion for later on. I was like, this is great. This makes sense. I'm like, I can find at least one person that will do this. So excitedly, I go over to X. I DM Justin because, he's a good friend. By the way, don't start blowing up his DMs. I don't want to. It's like there's like 50,000 authors that all of a sudden start contacting Justin directly.
Justin saying, what's going on?
Yeah. Justin and I are good friend. We go ways back and such. But I was so proud of myself. I was like, dude, get this. What if we got a sponsorship for our books? And he literally, this is his only response. He sends me a link to a tweet that he had done about 5 days prior. This guy not only thought of it before me, but he also thought of it to the next level. He thought, okay, what if I loaded up a single publication with 3 to 5 sponsors, and then I can also create bespoke options for specific companies and businesses? It could be like, I don't know, a CEO from a company writes a foreword for that specific book. He would do an offset print run that he would fulfill for a company themselves. It would have the CEO in it. They would pay for those books. They would pay for that spot and everything else. And I was like, oh my God. And he expanded even more. And I'm just like, there's a good reason why this guy is the brand deal whisperer, because he just thinks on a different level. Me, I'm like, I just sponsorships get what paid. And I literally, I felt like crying, because as soon as he said 3 to 5 sponsors, I'm like, oh my gosh, that means I literally could give myself an advance. I could get with these brands. I would get them to go ahead and sponsor the full series and broker a deal that makes sense for everybody involved. It's a win-win situation. And because I have so many connections within this industry and I have that reach and that audience, it was an easy sell for me. I was like, hey, I've got authors. You want authors? Let's do it through my books. What do you say? And the rest is history. Now, I will tell you this, that one thing I would say is if you plan on getting sponsorships on your books, Matty, do so in advance. I had already had like a hard concrete launch date of July 15th for this 8-part series that I was going to be doing. And I was going to get them to sponsor the entire thing. It was all or nothing for me. I was like, because I already had one pretty much set by the time I reached out to Justin. I was going to try to get another 3 to 4 added into it. But we're talking, it's like June 15th that this is happening. I've got 1 month to go. So I'm having to hit the ground running. And I'm reaching out everybody that I can. I find the top 5 brands I wanted to work with, like the 5 people that I absolutely loved. And I can go ahead and I can talk about those ones, but you don't need it for context to understand that these were 5 dream brands that I really wanted to have part of my books. 4 of the 5 accepted. The 5th one did accept because it was timing and budget. It was like, they're like, if you told us about 6 months ago, we'd probably be good to go. I ended up trying to fill in that 5th slot, but unfortunately it got down to the wire, and I found some companies that could do it. But again, it was timing. They had the budget, but they were like, when you're dealing with companies, they're having to run this up a ladder. They're having to run it past the team to make sure it makes sense. And since there's no proof of concept from me so far through sponsorships on a book, I couldn't be able to tell them definitively, like, hey, it's going to convert like this. I could only tell them based on my previous sales of my books. Like, here is how my previous sales did. So we can assume that the current sales will be at least this as a minimum, if not more, because it's been about 4 years since my last series that I did. But yeah, it got down to the wire, and I ended up getting about 4 sponsorships. And I had, out of fairness to the brands that sponsored these books, I won't share that number, but we'll say it's a substantial amount where I'm like, oh my gosh, I gave myself a healthy advance. And so now I know that all of my costs are covered. I don't ever have to worry about running Amazon ads. I don't need to worry about paying for book covers or interior formatting. Literally, all I got to do is just show up.
And can you describe what the theme of these books are, and then how you match the sponsors that you were pursuing based on the content of the books?
It comes down to just, well, first of all, the whole series is called Self-Publishing with Dale. I know, brilliant, right? It's my whole brand name and such. And the funny thing is, I toiled around with the series name because I was like thinking of search engine optimization. I think originally I was calling it like Self-Publishing Books. just seemed kind of generic. And I'm like, that's not me. Like, I'm not generic. And I thought, wait a second, something that actually gets pulled up on Amazon search is self-publishing with Dale. People literally look up my YouTube name on Amazon of all places.
Nice.
So I'm like, this only makes sense that I just go ahead and tap into that organically built-in traffic there for self-publishing with Dale, because it's clear people are looking for that. So the series is essentially my soup to nuts approach to self-publishing. And ultimately, there is an exit strategy on this, because I've got 8 parts that I've been sitting on since 2021. I just kept stockpiling books. I don't recommend this to anybody, by the way. But I started out with the beginner's book. It goes into the advanced book, which just launched last week on Thursday. And next book is going to be about ads. I've got one that's going to be about YouTube for authors. I've got another one about publishing wide. It's all about self-publishing. So with that being said, since I'd worked with some of these brands already, it was relatively simple for me to reach out because they already had results. So I'll just go ahead and name the brands, just because I said before, I was like, it doesn't matter. But to just kind of give context, my dream brand included Miblart, which I use them for cover design. They're fantastic. Their interior formatting is wonderful. I continue to work with them in a large capacity over on my main channel. I love Dibbly Create. Fantastic company. They've taken care of me. I've known the founders for a while. I love what they're doing. I love their forward thinking for the self-publishing space. They're so good at it. The one that was my biggest dream brand, I literally went into this thinking like I was going to get rejected. Draft to Digital. Love me some Draft to Digital. I can't say enough positive things about them. And that's not just because they decided to take me on for this, but when they accepted, I literally felt like crying because I didn't think they would say yes. I was like, oh, you didn't say no. Oh, okay. And then the 4th one is Book Award Pro. I know the founders, again, Book Award Pro. I've worked with them in many capacities with promotion as well as sponsorships and such. So those were easy. Out of niceness to the 5th brand that couldn't swing the budget and the timing and such, I'm not going to mention their name, but there was that 5th one. And I was like, oh, so it got down to, it was about 1 week away from July 15th. So it was about right around July, 8th. I think it was. And that's when it was my cutoff point. I was like, we're a week away. I've got to get this to my interior formatters over at Miblart, get it all kind of put together, get the ads inserted in there. So that's why I ended up cutting it off and leaving it at that. Now, someone even made the argument recently that said, well, can't you just fill that 5th slot? I could, but I really wanted to have my interiors somewhat similar from one book to the next. So that way there's that repetition. My readers would see Draft to Digital, Draft to Digital, Draft to Digital, Draft to Digital. And there would just be that repetition to where that doesn't just become an ad. It becomes just part of the full experience. And then next time someone's thinking about self-publishing their book, they would go with Draft to Digital. So that was my whole thought process. Could I still change my mind later and put a 5th sponsor in there? Or if one of the sponsors backs out at some capacity, because I did give them that inside our document, I could fill it if I wanted to. But for the most part right now, everything's taken care of, like literally everything. I'm going to continue to publish these books. I was going to publish them regardless of having the sponsorship. So them saying no wasn't going to make me lose sleep. Sure, I was going to have to pay for things out of my pocket, but now that we have the sponsors, I don't have to sweat anything like that. So hopefully that helped out in like painting this bigger picture here, because it was such a laborious process. And I will tell you, it's an adrenaline rush, because especially if you're like 1 month from launching, you're like getting a hold of people, like typing as quick as you possibly can, getting on the phone. Okay, hey, yeah, can I talk to this person? Great, fantastic. It was very stressful, but now that I'm on the other side of things and I only have to worry about getting the books over to the interior formatter and the cover designer and making sure that those ads are inserted where they should be, then I'm pretty much good to go. But yeah, it's so important that if you do get any type of advertisers, that it aligns with your brand. And I think the big challenging thing, though, for someone like you, Matty, that has fiction books, you're probably saying, okay, but how do I get a sponsor for something like this?
Actually, before you go there, can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Because
please.
I've already backed up 7 or 8 questions that I want to ask. So
Sorry.
Can you describe actually what the ads look like? Are they like you would open the print book or you open the ebook and the first couple of pages would be an ad, or are they embedded within the content of the book? Just talk a little bit about what the sponsorships look like to the reader.
I wanted to make this as simple as possible. So what I did was I left the advertisers in control. I pretty much had some things that were out of bounds. Like, for instance, I didn't want any advertisers competing with the other ones. So, for instance, Drafted Digital has another service that is for cover design. I was like, they initially gave me a concept that was promoting that. I was like, I'm sorry, that's a competition to Midwart. We can't promote that there. If this is a deal breaker, please let me know. So that was the big thing. So they gave me all the ad creative. I said, just make this as professional as possible. I want you guys to have a specific trackable link so we could see the progress from this. I didn't want just like the regular links that people can go to their site, such, because there's no way to track that. So they had to give me a specific trackable link, in some instances providing the QR code. So I didn't really have to do any of the creative. All I had to do was just approve it. So essentially at the end of the day, when they sent me the ads, I just would say, thumbs up, this is good to go. All four of the brands came with their A game. Like, they all look really professional. I put it in the front matter. Now, this is, like I said, it's brand new to me. So the reason why I put it in the front matter was look inside. How many people are going to look inside and see those very first things? So that's right there is like free advertising for the folks that are doing that. So that is one of the reasons why I put it in the front matter. However, I got a review through NetGalley, it might have been, or maybe it was ebook fairs. And they said, don't mind the hustle. It's really cool. I see the ads there, but it seems like it would make more sense to put it in the back matter, because now that I've gotten through all the book, there's more context to these advertisements and I'm more enticed to go get them. So I love that argument. Right now, the contract unfortunately states that I'm going to put it in the front matter. So unless I go back and renegotiate with these brands to put it in the back matter, I'm going to still fulfill that. I think probably something could be said about even putting it in the middle. So that way there is even more context to get to it. But doing the creative, I left it all up to them. Now, if you wanted to do the creative, I mean, it's going to be up to you on graphic design, and it becomes just a whole ugly situation. So I baked it into the contract that they would go ahead and fulfill it that way.
And did you always have the idea that it would be presented as an ad, as opposed to, you're writing a chapter or a book on distribution and you call out Drafted Digital, you put in the caveat that, it's sort of the equivalent of, I was given a free copy of this book in exchange for an honest review kind of thing. Like sharing that you're maybe getting money from this person, but making it more integrated into the content.
You bring up a great point. And actually, it was a conversation I had with Johnny Andrews a couple of weeks ago where we were discussing the sponsorship, and I told him about having the front matter, and he goes, I wouldn't have done it that way. And by the way, Johnny Andrews is a man that has helped out so many people, so many authors to elevate their businesses. I mean, he's developed $1 million, per year authors through his coaching and consulting. So this didn't fall on deaf ears when he said to me, he goes, ads are great, but he walked me back, and I guess he'd worked with a very famous author. I don't want to name drop because I don't know if there's any confidentiality involved with him and this author, but this author he'd worked with, very big name in the self-help space. This was back in 2012. And that person was doing the same thing I was doing, was going to do ad placement. He goes, no. That's not going to convert as well. He said, you want to make sure that you're doing product placement as opposed to ads. He goes, it's more organic and it comes off a little bit more genuine. Like, instead of like, I've got to pay my bills, here's my sponsors. Right. It's more of like, hey, I go to Drafted Digital and here is why. He says, of course, you want to make sure you disclose that when you're, offering that as an option. Like, hey, these guys have sponsored me, just so you know. That way you aren't getting beat up by FTC or any type of law, type stuff. But product placement, I was like, that is ingenious. Again, that train's already left the station. Doing product placement, I would love to do that. And maybe that's something I could probably consider for any of the publications after these 8-book series. But so far, so good. It's going really well with these 2 publications. I'm very happy with the direction. It seems like the brands are happy so far, too.
It does seem like, I want to get to a more broad question about reader experience, but I'm thinking that what I'm trying to sort through in my mind is that if you pick up a magazine, like you pick up a magazine aimed at writers, Indie Author Magazine, let's say, and you open it up and you expect to see ads. Like that's how they're making their money. And you expect the ads to be, sort of sprinkled throughout. Maybe they've placed the ad for the distribution or aggregator service on the same page as an article about distribution and aggregation, whatever that decision is.
Yep.
So, and people aren't as used to seeing that in a book. So can you talk a little bit about how you thought through what the reader experience was that you wanted? And then did you get feedback? You already said you had gotten some feedback from one of the beta readers. Can you talk a little bit about what the reader response has been to this idea?
I haven't heard anything negative. In fact, that one and only ebook fairs, I know for sure now, there was an ebook fairs because they gave me a 5-star review. They're like, despite the ads being there, like, I think it should have been in the back. But I haven't heard anything negative. Nobody's beat me up. And I was having a conversation with Chris Austin, the CEO of Drafted Digital, and he brought up the fact that like front matter in ebooks, he goes, it's probably end up going to get skipped. He's like, because a lot of instances when people open their ebooks, it goes right into the introduction.
Right.
I did, however, I don't know if this is like some special trick that maybe Miblart did, but they had the start page on the cover. So when I purchased a copy of my ebook, I opened it up and went right into the cover. So I got to see all 4 of the ads when I scrolled up to that. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the same experience for everybody else. I was always led to believe, and the same thing as Chris had mentioned was, when you have something available through Amazon, they're going to start it right on the introduction. Anything before it, like the table of contents, no, it's not going to start there.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that if you happen to lean into something like this. But so far, no negative response. No one's beat me up over it. If anything, I've had a few attaboys. That's kind of nice. But for the most part, it's usually like peers like you, Matty, where they're like, that's actually brilliant. And I was like, yes, I invented it myself. No, I didn't.
So we're talking a little bit about reader response. How about publisher or distributor response? What things should people keep in mind in terms of the terms and conditions of particular distribution platforms?
That is a brilliant way to put it, because you and I were actually discussing this, and I was like, I had to mention this to you because I unearthed this issue when I was recently producing a video about terms and conditions. You need to go and review terms and conditions for each of the platforms that you're publishing to. Now, if you're selling direct, doesn't matter. You can go ahead and do whatever. You could make an entire Sears Roebuck catalog if you wanted to of ads if it's doing direct sales. But if you're leveraging a platform like KDP, Drafted Digital, Publish Drive, so on and so forth, go through and review those terms and conditions, because some of them might actually have somewhere in the fine print that ads are not allowed. Now, there are going to be some people that are probably freaking out right now going, oh my gosh, I don't want to get my account terminated, blah, 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 yakety schmackety. I've heard many people that say they've seen so many ads in books before that those accounts, if they were to try to shut down all of these accounts, it would be thousands of people that would be losing that. Because, I mean, think about ads. I mean, ads could probably even be something as simple as, well, there's an ad to go subscribe to your email newsletter. Can't people be shut down for something like that? I mean, there's so many ways we can argue this. And I've even heard some people saying, like, these are veterans in the business that were saying to me, like, I've never known anybody to get themselves banned or have this particular rule enforced. But if you don't want to be the outlier, be that one person that's made an example of, read the terms and conditions and honor those and find the platforms that are good for that.
Well, and I think that the other consideration is, I kind of have 2 questions here I'm trying to combine into one. One is that if you have many streams of income as you do, and then Amazon or whoever gets angry and takes your books off the site, it's painful, but it's not fatal.
Right.
You know, you have other ways of making money. You have other ways of reaching your audience. Yeah. Someone who is earlier in their career doesn't necessarily have that sort of cushion. And the other thing, this is part 2 of this question is, does this work if you're not a celebrity? You're a celebrity in this author space. And so you have this kind of, leverage and ability to approach organizations like Drafted Digital and put this forward as a legitimate proposal. Yeah. But to what extent do you think this is realistic for people earlier in their careers to do, both from the point of view of how successful it will be and also how how risk tolerant do you have to be in order to pursue it?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more work ahead of you. Thank goodness I've had a decade in this business and 8 years in the YouTube business that, yeah, I do have that Z-list celebrity status. It's not even B-list here, folks. But all that aside, yeah, I'm very fortunate that I built a lot of these relationships, and this took years of just knowing some of these people. It wasn't like I just suddenly met Miblart and like, hey, you want to sponsor my book? And they're like, yeah. There was a lot of groundwork that was put into it, but I don't want you to feel discouraged if you're a new author and think, well, this is not an option for me. And this is why I wanted to name drop Justin Moore, Creator Wizard, because he actually teaches people that are brand new to like the YouTube space or brand new video creators, brand new bloggers. He teaches them whether you have 0 or 10 followers or 100 followers, like you can still be able to do it because you have that skill already. You wrote the book, you're going to publish it, you know it's going to make some sales. Whether you got the proof of concept or not, all you have to do is paint that picture and show that brand or that company what's in it for them. Now, you can't be going to somebody, though, and just throwing some number out there and be like, Matty, I'm going to get you to sponsor this book for $10,000. Matty's going to be like, what do you know? What? Like, no, how about absolutely not? It could probably be something as simple as, I don't know, $50 to have ad placement put in your book for the next year. I mean, that might be small, but it's something because from that proof of concept, you can be able to take that as a case study and then you can start to upsell people based on that. And in fact, that's what I'm currently doing with this particular run. I am tracking every last bit of data from the sales that I'm making across each iteration, across every single platform, and what is it converting for each one of these brands that are involved in this. Because now I can go and renegotiate deals based on that. It might be more, it might be less, but at least I have that data. But one of the things I would say is if this is something that piques your curiosity and you're like, I'm brand new, I'm not really sure. Here's the thing you can go into it. You're going to already publish the book already. So if someone tells you no, not a big deal. Don't take that rejection personally. But what I would say is if somebody says no, ask them why. I know it seems weird. You're going to be like, why? They're going to tell you why. Just be like, hey, tell me honestly. If my baby's ugly, I just want somebody to go ahead and tell me. Just give it to me straight. I did this years ago when I actually approached a brand and they had told me no. And I had a friend of mine that said, go back and ask them why. Because they're going to be able to tell you why. It could probably be budgetary reasons. It could be that they just don't see the value in what you have to offer. But if you can find out why, you can better come to the whole situation. I would say, though, if you ever do approach a brand, don't just go over and ask them, can you do a sponsorship? The answer is going to be no every single time. You need to come to it like, what's in it for them? I'm going to be publishing this book. It's going to be available in libraries, on Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, you name all those things. I anticipate that based on reader demand, I'm going to potentially sell this many copies. You can't promise you're going to sell so many copies, and you can't promise that it's going to convert to sales. But what you can do is tell them what you do know and come forward with that. Again, don't just go, can you sponsor my book for $100? The answer is going to be no. Because it's not often talked about. I mean, shoot, you and I have been in this business for a while. How many times have you heard sponsorships talked about with books?
Never.
So, so that's, hopefully conversations like you and I are having here, Matty, more authors are going to go ahead and have that. And if for some reason you're like, I don't like sponsorships, I don't want them in my books, it's sleazy, it's terrible, it's great, it's not for you, move on. Yeah. But I think that it's something worth considering, especially if you're working with a brand or company you can wholeheartedly stand behind.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And I also think people early on, if they don't have a track record to illustrate things like past sales, then they could highlight the steps they plan on taking. I'm going to be doing talks in libraries and I'm going to be running Amazon ads and I'm going to be emailing my newsletter list. Those will be evidence of your seriousness about the value that you're going to be providing on your side of the sponsorship.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree more. You just have to, we're creative individuals. All authors are creative. We wouldn't be in this business if we weren't creative. If you're listening to this and you have written a book, whether you've written it or published it, it doesn't matter. If you've written it, you're creative. So think about ways that you can engineer this so that you can win. Just anticipate if you're brand new, you're going to get a lot more no's than yeses. I got some no's. Matty, I told you already, I was like, I couldn't get that 5th brand because I got a few no's. And unfortunately, it usually hurts, but anymore, I'm so used to it. And like, no, okay, great. I'm moving on.
Well, I just have to highlight something. Michael Aran and I just had a 2-part podcast episode based on our book. And one of the things that Michael was saying, I was talking about how to deal with rejection. If you pitch yourself as a speaker at an event, how to deal with rejection. And his advice was, it's transactional. It's not a personal reflection of your worth as a human being. It's a transaction. And if you approach it as a transaction, that the goal is to make it as profitable or valuable or at least pleasant on both sides as possible, then it takes a lot of that sting away than if you see every rejection as like being told that you don't want to go to the prom with someone, trying to take the emotion out of it.
What's wrong with me?
Exactly. And as you were talking, I was realizing that, I can think of many ways that this could play out for my own books or the podcast, for example, in terms of sponsorships. But one thing that I think would be fun for my fiction books is that almost all my fiction books were inspired in some part about a real location. So as an example, one of my books is a fictionalized version of a local airport near me, a general aviation airport. Another one is based sort of roughly on a local winery. And I thought it would actually be fun to have an ad for the winery or an ad for, the flying school or something. It would not only be non-offensive, but I think it would be that sort of fun cross between real life and fiction that I think readers really enjoy. Like there's scenes where one of the characters is taking flying lessons. And then at the end, if you said, oh, are you intrigued by flying lessons and you live in the Philadelphia area? Well, check out the flying lessons that are available at such and such. That could be a really fun way to insert sponsorships into fiction.
It almost breaks that fourth wall,
yes, exactly.
Where you have that ad integration. As you're kind of saying this, it made me think of Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler is a freaking genius when it comes to all of his movies. Now, whether you like his movies or not remains to be seen, but his product placement is just brilliant. I guarantee if you've ever watched Happy Gilmore, Subway is probably the first thing that comes to your mind because Subway was a part of it. He directly integrated. And a lot of these movies out there will put in like a specific brand of cars. They'll have a specific brand of like clothing line. There's so many just subtle things that are baked within movies. So if you've ever been reluctant about sponsorship placement within your book, think about it inside the movies. The movies, they do it. And they got it. And gosh, you just shared something with me that just, boom, just blew my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, organic placement. Like that right there, way better than my front matter idea.
Well, and even if people were uncomfortable about the idea of putting sponsorship ads in their fiction book or in any book, there are other opportunities. You could get in touch with that flying school or the winery and say, hey, my book is about to come out. And I'd love to play up the fact that some of the scenes were based on a fictionalized version of yours. And I want to run ads against that on Facebook. Would you be willing to share the cost of the ads or something like that?
Oh, gosh, yes. Like there's so much. Oh, yes. I'm glad we're having this conversation because see, now I'm starting to learn stuff from you.
Well, one question that springs to mind is that in many ways, it sounds as if what you were looking to achieve with your sponsorships was almost like a replacement for Kickstarter. Was that a factor? Does that ring true for you? And if so, why would you choose one route over the other?
Here's the funny thing is, I actually was considering doing Kickstarter for the 4th book in my series. But as I've gotten deeper into this campaign, I mean, I'm 2 books into it. 3rd book's already in production, getting ready to hit it out by September 15th. I decided to pull the plug because I know if I do Kickstarter, it's brand new to me. And I want to give it more undivided attention. So chances are likely when I wrap up this series, I'm going to end up doing Kickstarter anyway. And I'm going to do it as like an omnibus that I'll sell the omnibus through Kickstarter. So I'm going to essentially be able to triple dip. I'm getting book sales. I'm getting the crowdsourcing. I'm getting that funding from the sponsorships as well. So I'm able to do all of that. And so the stuff does add up. So I don't think you need to choose one or the other, but you got to keep in mind, if you're going to do sponsorships and you're going to do a crowdfunding campaign, it's going to require a lot more work. And that's why, even with my experience and my discretionary budget, I just realized Kickstarter it wasn't a good time for me right now. If I was experienced in Kickstarter, so if I was Russell Nohelty, chances are very likely Russell probably be like, yeah, no problem, I got this. Like, he could probably do it. Now, so if you're used to crowdfunding, there's no reason why you couldn't be able to, first of all, someone like Russell would be able to provide numbers based on his previous Kickstarter campaigns to his sponsors. And that means there's more readers. There's people that are very, very invested. They're definitely a warm audience. So why not put that sponsorship into that crowdfunding? But, there's so many ways we can do this. But yeah, you can probably triple dip. At this point, I think I just only have so much mental bandwidth to handle all of it. So that's why I just don't want to go all in. I will tell you that, being straightforward, that I will be doing these book sponsorships again. But unlike this last time, I'm going to approach the brands and companies in late 2024, because the first of the publications beyond the 8 that I have right now are going to go out April 2025. So it'll give me 4 months of lead time. And it also give me enough time to go ahead and promote and build that Kickstarter campaign, so that way I can do it. So yeah, I will still be doing the Kickstarter. I promise you, Matty. We'll have another podcast then.
It's fine. I'm always hosting people to talk about Kickstarter, and then we get together and talk about it, and I get to the end of the conversation and say, I just can't. I can't see my way to doing it, but it's working really well for a lot of people.
For sure. Yeah, I'm loving it. Like I said, Russell and Monica Lionel, they both put out a fantastic book. I've studied some of their stuff. They just do really good stuff.
Well, always lovely chatting with you, Dale. And please let everyone know where they can go to find out more about you and everything you do online.
Well, the best way to do it is you can find one of my latest books at every fine major online retailer and library. The first book is self-publishing for new authors, and the second book is advanced self-publishing for authors, where I just take you up the next step. Fun fact here, this is exclusive. Nobody else knows this yet, but you do now. Those two actually used to be one book. I wrote it all in NaNoWriMo in 2021. And then when I went to go and edit it, I realized, I was like, this is 2 different books.
Yeah, so the audiences would be very different for sure.
Absolutely. So yeah, it was definitely separated. But yeah, you can go ahead, search up Dale L. Roberts, and you'll be able to find any of my publications at any fine major online retailer and library. Libraries are so important to me. So if for some reason you're cash strapped, or you're just like, I don't know about spending money on this guy's book, go over to the library. Just go check it out and then go buy it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dale. Are you intrigued by the idea of book sponsorships? And what ideas do you have for how that might play out for your own books? Would you never consider soliciting sponsorships for your books? And if not, why not? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just leave a comment on YouTube. And if you got value from this episode and were thinking, I wish I could buy Matty a cup of coffee, you can do that. Scroll to the bottom of any page at theindyauthor.com and click Buy Me a Coffee. Until next time, here's wishing you favorable winds and smooth sailing on your creative voyage.